welcome to List Off. I'm Ossie.
And I'm Nat, and this week we will be counting down our top 5 robots. And what do we mean by robots? I have meant that to mean, I don't know what your definition is, I've meant that to be robots, cyborgs, mechanical men or women, machine people, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's anything that might be a kind of on the fence kind of, is it or isn't it a robot on your list? I think I've got a few.
I think you've got to use common sense about how many parts of your body you need replacing with robotic parts to become a robot. Like, is Darth Vader a robot? You know, like I think like,
yeah,
I feel like you've got to have like, have you got to have a robot brain to be a robot?
I don't know. I've given it a very lax interpretation of what a robot is.
You have to look a bit robot-y. No, you don't have to look a bit robot-y at all. That's not true. That's fine. We're not, we're not banning robots or something where you need a really clear definition of them. We're just
androids. They're
androids,
human. Yeah.
Mandroids.
Yeah.
I like the word mandroid.
So do I.
It's like a manwich, but for androids.
Cyborgs. Yeah, robots. You know what
replicants.
I mean. Replicants. I guess where I might draw the line is when I feel like they're some sort of android, but made out of a more synthetic.
A synthezoid.
A synthezoid. Let's call them synthezoids. Do you know what I mean? Like the sort of ones in sci-fi that feel like they're clones somehow. Yeah, not clones. They've got to have a bit of metal in them.
I have got a synthezoid on my list, but I think it's got metal in it. Definitely.
I think that's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very easy. I'm sure like a couple of mine you could raise an eyebrow at, but I think historically they're good robots, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'll stand by them. I'll stand by my list.
Are you a fan of robots?
Yeah, I'm a fan of robots, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was going to be, I know you had some trouble picking out a top 5. Whereas to me, I was like, that's a good robot. That's a good robot. But I don't know, like, so I feel like I'm a robot fan. And probably, historically, I feel like I'm a robot fan. But it made me wonder, are you not so much of a robot fan then, Ossie? I would have thought you were more of a robot guy.
I like a robot in a fantastical setting, but I have to admit, in the real world, I think there's nothing much as scary as robots, and a future of robot warfare where we're enslaved by robots. That's a bad future to me. That's like a scary one. And we've already got, unmanned drones and some of these new robots coming out. They're great to watch them doing tricks on YouTube, but then you think, put a gun in its hand or meld a gun into its hand or put a gun in its nose, because it's a robot to do anything. Then it's a bit more sinister. So, yes, I like robots, but I don't want the world to be taken over by them.
You don't like them in the real world. Yeah, I guess that's true. You have things like the Terminator, which presupposes a sort of robot warfare of the future. Although what is good, although we see the scary robots and, doing backflips and things, the robots that are currently being bred for warfare are the ones on Robot Wars. So we probably haven't got a lot to worry about just yet.
Yeah,
I think we're probably, if they're who we're actually against, we'll probably be all right.
Yeah, because Sir Kill-a-Lot has never actually killed anyone.
Yeah, certainly not a lot of people.
No. Maybe a couple by accident, actually.
Craig Charles is probably still on our side, or whether he'll become, perhaps he will join up with the robots. We don't know. But currently, I think we're safe.
We outnumber
unless
them.
they've got to advance somewhat.
Yeah.
Before we're in trouble. So I think we're all right.
For now,
let's keep an eye on them.
We should give a shout out to Graham Murphy. I think this is the second list of his we've done, but he sent us a long list of lists to add to our long list of lists. And he said robots, and it was like, yeah, robots is good. We'll do robots. Yeah, are you going to start us off?
My number 5 are the tripods from the War of the Worlds. And I think I like them just because I've always found them a very kind of, I was going to say like a cool design, and yet there are various different versions of them. But I think the idea of this sort of Martian tripods, big, huge machines that come down, but written in a like Victorian era, but everything about them always makes me think of like it's like the future.
Mm.
It's not steampunk. It's genuinely like it's written by like a visionary person who seems to imagine sci-fi of 100 years of the future.
Mm.
And I've always thought they're cool, and they've got either legs. They ever always tripods are interpreted as having big sort of long legs that's stiff, kind of like a sort of three-legged AT-AT
Mm.
from the Star Wars movies, or they're more kind of long tentacle legs, always with a big pod on top. And there's this sort of huge, sort of almost mirrored metallic looking. And I've always found that I really love that book, mainly because of how parochial it is. And I think it's a great book about London, if you like London, because it's essentially aliens coming in from Woking towards London. And it isn't really until they get to Westminster that they acknowledge that they're in London. And you go, 1887, see? See, that's how London works. And also, it's a great book because it starts off in Woking, where the aliens land, and the main protagonist is in Woking and goes off to London, and he's like, "Oh, there's like Martians have landed in Woking," and it's just this great thing about the speed of news media now. How everyone in London's like, "What's happened?" And he's like, "There's like Martians in Woking,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "No, I don't think so. I think I would have heard about that." And I really like the book, but I thought I'd dig it out because I thought I'll find a passage from the book where they describe the tripods. And the narrator describes it as, how can I describe it? A monstrous tripod, higher than many houses, striding over the young pine trees and smashing them aside in its career. A walking engine of glittering metal, striding now across the heather, articulate ropes of steel dangling from it, and the clattering tumult of its passing mingling with the riot of thunder. And I think it's got like it makes a point of sort of describing the metal as being shiny even. And I really like the way that that's interpreted in like the sort of 50s film, and in sort of every screen adaptation since. They've kind of got, they always do it a bit differently, and yet every version of it, there's a really sort of cool sort of 50s version with the kind of pods on top and everything from like this. I just think they're such a cool robot design that whenever I think of big metal men, and also like in the War of the Worlds album cover and things, it's like I don't really like the music, but I always just think, look at them, they're cool. It's just such a cool robot design.
Do you think it's like that's the ultimate sort of futuristic thing of it, is they've gone an alien, futuristic and alien. They've gone like they've gone well, everything on Earth basically has 2 legs or 4. So an alien one would have 3. That's like, I like that as such a as such a vital early bit of sci-fi, to be like, imagine if there were only 3 legs. It's like something my kids would come up with, like, you know, imagine if you had 3 ears. You'd be like, oh, it's confusing.
I mean, in that way, yeah, I think you're right. It's probably a very simplistic thing, but I guess it's thinking about, I don't know, kind of like industry and machinery, and just extrapolating that. It's not a story about the future. It's about aliens, but the idea they're more technologically advanced is done by looking at it and going, oh, like machinery, right?
Yeah.
And just being like, what if they're Martians, essentially, like, you know, are those cars essentially, which I think is
what year is it written?
1897.
Right, so it's pre, you know, most people are not going to, other than railways, you know, most people are not going to have seen any, you know, railways and factory machines. You're not going to have seen much other machinery and much other moving metal. So it's really,
and I think there's like, it's good historical robot. I think a couple of mine I think are quite good historical robots, and I think for something that's that old, I think it's really lasted, and as a description and as like an idea of it, it still works totally as like a, oh yeah, that works now. As you know, they did that big War of the Worlds film with Tom Cruise a few years ago,
Hmm.
and it still totally works as an idea for a big robot.
Well, it's like I'm
It's not
saying,
dated.
being invaded by robots, really scary.
Mm.
Really
Yeah, yeah,
scary.
yeah.
Definitely.
That's true. That's true. That's my number five.
My number five is the 1951 creation Astro Boy, the kind of reverse Pinocchio. He's a little robot boy who wants to become more like a human, but he's kind of perfect, and he wants to become more fallible and more emotional and yeah, human, and was created by Osamu Tezuka back in 1951, and in manga, millions of comic books in Japan, and then made into TV shows a few times. I think there's about three different Astro Boy TV shows, and there's even like a recent 3D movie, isn't there?
Yeah, they did one. I think I don't know who made that. I think it's one of those ones that has a different voice cast in every territory. But yeah, they did try one recently.
Yeah, I didn't check
I
that
don't know.
out.
I don't know how well known Osamu Tezuka is to the general public. I don't know what he'd be most famous for. Certainly, Astro Boy would be one of the things.
I think
And I think he
I think in America and places where it showed on the TV a lot, then that's definitely what he's most famous for.
totally.
Yeah.
And I think if people think they might not know what Astro Boy is, I'm sure there'll probably be a picture showing up. But you'll probably go, "Oh yeah, yeah, that guy." You probably know him without even knowing you know him.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was thinking about Astro Boy as well. But it's like a human. Yeah, it is. It's like an android Pinocchio, as you say. Osamu Tezuka also did that thing. Is it called Kimba, the White Lion?
Yeah.
Which was basically what the Lion King was taking a lot from.
Yeah,
Um,
and Astro Boy goes into the, if it's, you have the same thing with Kurosawa where like they do things influenced by Hollywood and then they in turn influence Hollywood back in the other direction. So Astro Boy definitely not just a big nod to Pinocchio, but to Disney's Pinocchio. It's got this,
yes, yeah.
it's of that, the way he looks and everything. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's a kids show. The kind of disco-y theme tune, whether in the Japanese version or the American one, is phenomenal. Really good pumping disco. Quite early as well for that, I think. But that's great, and I just love. He also, he kind of has super powers, sort of thing, super robot powers, and he's kind of a normal boy, but then a robot boy, but then he ends up saving people and fighting robots, always fighting robots basically and aliens. But his powers are really random. I think I've just got a list here of Wikipedia, which is 100,000 horsepower strength, jet flight, high intensity lights in his eyes, adjustable hearing, instant language translation, a retractable machine gun in his hips, and a high IQ capable of determining if a person is good or evil. And like that's his best thing. It's like he can just, in most things with you battling things, there's like a kind of like, are they good, are they bad? He just kind of he can know,
He just knows.
and
He
then
knows.
he can get his retractable hip machine guns out.
No, I've got a lot of time for Astro Boy as a concept. I think I'm always. I really love the Disney Pinocchio, and I think because of that, I've got a lot of time Pinocchio, who I guess didn't show up in either of our puppets list, but I guess he's a fictional puppet.
He's
The
got
others are real.
he's also got no strings, so
Yes, I guess
not really. He's an ex
it's a
puppet,
difficult choice. Yeah, yeah,
former puppet.
yeah. But no, I think that's a great choice. It would or perhaps should have been on my list. It was one definitely would have been in my also rans.
His Japanese name is Tetsuon Atomu, which is like most Japanese character names, cooler than Astro Boy.
I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if you do, but at the same time, it was one of the ones that was sort of adapted, wasn't it, for kids in the States? So lots of, I guess, in the 60s, so a lot of people kind of grew up with Astro Boy translated into kind of Saturday morning cartoons in the States. And there was also Marine Boy, wasn't there? But I don't know if that is at all related or unrelated or?
Yeah, it's him as well. Marine
Okay.
Boy. It's Tezuka as well. I'm fairly sure. Yeah, it totally is. I think it was just like, yeah, you want another hit like that? I got you covered, Marine Boy.
My number 4 is the Tin Man or the Tin Woodman from Wizard of Oz. And I was sort of going, is he a robot? Is he? And I was kind of questioning the kind of legitimacy, but then I thought, but I think he's a real like influence on sort of machine men and robots and things. And I was trying to work out, would he count? When I was looking up, researching bits of the Tin Man, there was loads of it I didn't really know about, but it was absolutely fascinating. But the Tin Man was essentially a human man who has had all bits of himself replaced with metal. And I went, oh right, well he is then. He's just like I don't quite know how the mechanics work, but he is
You're
a
not a
human
mechanic.
man who has, who has. So unlike TikTok in The Wizard of Oz, who is clockwork, so you would say, is he more of a mechanical man? That's a mechanical
That's the one in
person.
Return to Us.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a big fan of that one.
So he's a clockwork man,
Yeah.
whereas the Tin Man is replaced. But like that's like in Doctor Who, the Cybermen are just men who have different parts of themselves replaced. The origin of the Tin Man is that the Tin Man was in love with a Munchkin girl, and when he was a regular man, and in the regular world,
Cancel him.
it was a very caring relationship. And the Tin Man's real name is it Nick? What is it? I had this. Oh no, his real name is Nick Chopper. Nick Chopper. And I thought, no way. There's no way. Apparently his real name. Yeah, real name, Nick Chopper.
Nick Chopper
the
sounds
Tin
like
Man.
he's in a Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, he does. Or he's sort of like, it sounds like someone's like porn name
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
He's
yeah, that's how you find your porn name, by getting your uncle's first name and the name of your first bike.
Yeah, he was originally in love with a Munchkin, and the Munchkin was working for this woman who didn't like that this Munchkin was now sort of in love. So she called on the Wicked Witch of the East to come and sort it out. And the Wicked Witch of the East cursed Nick Chopper to essentially, he had to carry on working. He wasn't allowed to stop cutting wood. But while he was cutting wood, he would chop himself to pieces.
Oh my God.
He chopped himself to various. It gets worse. It's weirder than that, but sort of brilliant. He chops himself to pieces whilst also trying to keep up his day job. And then he goes to the tinsmith, who's called Q-Clip, who starts going, all right, well, you've cut your arm off. I'm going to make you a tin arm. So he replaces his arm with a tin arm, but then carries on chopping. And then it's like that. He then chops his other arm off. The tinsmith replaces his other arm, and he chops his legs off and he replaces his legs. And it keeps going to the point where Nick Chopper chops his own head off and is replaced with a tin head. And but all this time, the Munchkin, who's called Nimmy Ammy, is still in love with the Tin Man. This is where it gets sad. Until the Tin Man chops out his own heart, and that's why he has no heart. And when she realizes that he has no heart, she falls out of love with him and realizes that he can no longer love because he has no heart. And that's why he's searching for the heart. So when he gets his heart back, which again, he gets his heart back, and when he goes back to see her, he realizes that she has since remarried, and she was now in a relationship with someone who is called Captain Fighter. Captain Fighter. So he goes back to visit the Munchkin girl.
Does he get into a fight with him?
No, but I think that all the names you realise in the Oz books are very descriptive.
Yeah.
Nick Chopper, the woodsman, Captain Fighter, who I think's a soldier, Nimiami is now in a relationship, so he goes back to find her. He's got his heart back. He's got her heart now. So he goes back, and she says, "Oh well, I'm now in a relationship with Captain Fighter." But then she tells a story to him about when she went to meet Captain Fighter. She likes Captain Fighter, and the woman she works for, still working for her, goes, "All right, well I'll just do this again." So she calls back the Wicked Witch from the East and says, "Oh, Nimiami's got another boyfriend. Can you do another trick on him?" So the Wicked Witch of the East says, "What? Yeah, same trick probably." Curses him to cut himself apart again.
What?
So Captain Fighter now starts cutting himself apart, but he has magic glue. So rather than he goes back and tries to go back to Q-Clip, the tinsmith, and he's like, "Oh, can you start replacing me as well?" So rather than having a second Tin Man, though, they find some magic glue. So Captain Fighter is both part tin, but he's also got the glue. And when he lost his own arm by chopping it to pieces, they found pieces of the original Tin Woodsman, Nick Chopper. So part of what Captain Fighter is are the glued remains of the original. So when he gets there, and he's now been called, and then he's renamed himself when he's now fully transformed, and he's now called Chopfit. And Chopfit is so now Nimiami loves Chopfit, but she's able to say to the Tin Man, "Well, I do love Chopfit, but part of the reason I love him is he is part tin like you. He is part like you used to be, and he's partly her second love." So there's a sort of it's very bittersweet.
It's better, though,
But it's
isn't
sort
it?
of still sad, isn't it?
It's a
But then it
combo.
means the Tin Man is still a tragic figure who gets to go, "Oh, well, I never got the girl, really."
That's an amazing story. I think The Wizard of Oz would be really improved by a kind of Tin Man prequel in the,
Yeah.
to expand the Oz cinematic universe. You know, they've got just the two films. You do Tin Man prequel, and then if that's a hit,
Chopfit.
not not a chop fit movie, but if that's a hit, then
Chopfit.
you're doing
A Chopfit Disney Plus
no,
series.
you're doing the Cowardly Lion movie. You're doing the
Yeah.
the Scarecrow movie.
But historically, I think there's a lot of that. Like, it's interesting you say that about Astro Boy. You think, oh, well, there you go. There's a Tin Man who's a machine man who wants a heart. Apparently, the origin people think is that there was lots of stuff in that era. So that's 1909, I think, around then.
Mm-hmm.
Wizard of Oz. It's that sort of time. Did I write it down? No, so it's that sort of time. I think, sort of very early 1900s, and then I think people were saying that at that time you would see lots of political cartoons that were, you would have kind of tin-looking men and scarecrows, and one would represent, industrialization, and one would represent farmers. So you'd often have these cartoons that would have a tin man and a scarecrow in them, and that's probably where the idea comes from. But I kind of think, again, like, the influence on that, as much as it's sort of a simplistic view, is that it does feel like a lot of that stuff, it's a kind of almost fairy tale way of looking at it, but you do feel that that has influenced lots of future robots. And even things like Wizard of Oz, it feels like it's quite I'm sure it's a big influence on something like Star Wars. And as much as all that, those kind of celebrations at the end of achieving their goals and everything, all feels very Star Warsy. And I think the Tin Man is always one of those, iconic metal men. Supposedly as well, he is actually made of iron rather than tin, and it was retconned within the thing. And they explained that he's only tin plated, whereas a lot of his joints are iron, which is why he can rust.
And you need oiling and everything.
Yeah, so otherwise he wouldn't work. So they have explained. I guess that was the kind of, the nerds of the day were writing and going, how is it that the Tin Man can rust? And
was
so
there
they went,
like a sort of Wizard of Oz part work for fans to follow up all the kind of like technical details behind, where you get schematics of chop mix?
I quite like but actually when you read it, as the books continue, it does feel like L. Frank Baum is like retconning lots of bits of the story or explaining bits, and it does feel like kids or something have written in and gone, how's this happened? And also, I like that they have given them all proper backstories to explain that they aren't just like, he's not just like a tin man. He's got a proper back. Don't worry about that. He's got a proper backstory, and that. So yeah, apparently he is iron. And when someone said, um, like they one people asked him about it, said, how are you rusting then if you made a tin? Um, and he said, there's no plates like tin, as a kind of little play on words of there's no place like home. Tin Man. The more you find out about Tin Man, the more you like him. What tragic figure that you don't know. He's got a proper tragic backstory.
I'm looking forward to our top 5 scarecrows and top 5 lion episodes, where we can get the rest of the backstories from you on the
Yeah.
characters of Oz.
Top 5 scarecrows. Well, I might be up for that. There's probably some good ones.
Maybe 5. I'm not crazy about scarecrows.
I reckon we could get 5, but our 5 would both be the same, just maybe not in the same order.
Yeah.
But I reckon we could do top 5 scarecrows. I reckon that's a classic episode. 1900 was the Tin Man.
Amazing.
What's your number 4?
My number 4 is a real robot, like a real life robot, but it's not a Roomba that hoovers all of your room except for the corners. It's Atlas, the humanoid robot from Boston Dynamics. Boston Dynamics came from MIT, spun off from MIT, but they're now owned by Hyundai. They were owned by Google for a while. Very much my favorite robot engineers in the real world. They've got Atlas. I don't know if you've seen Atlas. If you've seen any robots doing like parkour, jumping onto things,
Yeah, I think so.
That's Atlas. Because Honda's rival Asimo, who's been going longer, is rubbish at that stuff. It'll be like here's Atlas jumping, doing a back twist, and landing on top of a box, and then they'll be like, here's Asimo climbing upstairs.
One of the big humanoid robots that I see about, there's one of them that always looks like he shit himself, and he's sort of walking with this sort of gait.
That's Asimo.
That's Asimo, right?
Asimo has a pooed himself walk very much.
Yeah, yes, he's got this sort of.
Yeah, his bum is never lifting his bum. He's never standing.
Exactly, that's the guy. That's the guy I'm thinking of.
No, he looks like a spaceman in a classic astronaut suit, but small and pooey. No, but the Atlas is less humanoid looking, but is 2 legs, 2 arms. But can do amazing stuff, and hasn't yet killed anyone, so it's good. And when you watch the videos of Atlas, you really, and any of the robots at Boston Dynamics, they have like a dog one and a kind of grabber arm one, and but you really feel for them, because most of the demos include mean handlers pushing them over with sticks and attacking them and stuff, so that the robots can show off how they're good at self-righting themselves, stabilizing, standing back up, doing flips, dodging out the way, all those kinds of things. So they're constantly being bullied by humans, and I'm worried about this because I've seen, like, the Matrix and those kind of things, like, by oppressing the robots and being mean to them, that's how they develop the that's how they get the need to overthrow humans. So I really like what Boston Dynamics are doing, but don't bully them.
Exactly. This is Isaac Asimov all over.
Exactly.
Just try and hang out with them. Don't try and enslave them.
Yeah.
Just try and have a nice chat. So they're much more advanced than when I was a kid. There were lots of things from like Tomy. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
That were like, there was one. What was he called? I think there was one that was meant to be really good. That was called something like Omnicron or something. It might have been Omni, maybe it's just called Omni Robot even. And he was like, he could do a few things, but he was mainly just like, but his main thing seemed to be that I think you could put like, he could carry a tray and you could probably put like a drink on it or something. Omnicron, was he called? And there was ones that were much cheaper. There was one that you could get, there was a very affordable one whose own skill would be like, if he hit a wall, he'd turn a corner.
Yeah. Very
much what the Hoover one is like now. But this was just that was his thing. Like, it's like, see, I mean, like, I'll just turn if I. And he was cheap. We had one of those, but there were a few, and they were kind of looked a bit like Rom from the Marvel Comics, Rom Space Knight. They had those kind of. It looked a bit like that, and it was white, and had the sort of body of like what I'm thinking almost like a Wally type body, and they were fun. But I guess Atlas and Asimo are kind of probably the better versions of
Yeah, you
of.
can't buy Atlas. Atlas is not available to buy. The dog one is. You can buy the dog one
Oh
from
yeah,
business or something. Yeah, it's
what's the
like
dog one do?
it's
Do a bit
got
of
like
jumping and.
4 legs. It's very
Mhm.
mobile, but then it's got like a long, almost like a kind of snake head with a grabber on the end on a long arm. So it's a bit the dog, but a bit of dog, but it's a bit like the Thing dog from the Thing. It's a bit scary dog. It has to be. There's an episode of
Yeah,
Black Mirror with dogs that are a lot like this. So it's definitely got a scary side to it. Um, people you talk about real ones. Do you remember you could get the add-on Rob for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the
no.
Famicom, and it like plugged into your Nintendo and did not very much, but it's quite beloved of old Nintendo fans.
I'm thinking of the dog that you used to just get that had the dog toy that could do little barks and then do a backflip, and that was
Yep.
its 2 rolls. That was a
Yep.
good
Well, it's one
good
more
toy.
than I've never seen a real dog do a backflip like that.
No, no. My number 3 is R2D2, a droid from the Star Wars universe. You've maybe seen him.
Oh yeah,
He's a little guy. Uh, and I think I'm doing that because they sort of represent all those kind of droid characters in Star Wars and how satisfying that kind of like that. I think they have robot characters, but there's a whole backstory about them, and you kind of have that from straight away. As soon as they're introduced, they're almost like salvaged, and you have this idea that they all have this huge, yeah, backstories, and you know that they're used as slaves, but there's lots of them, and it has all that. You know, they can be broken and fixed, but they're um, but they're essentially humanoid and are that they're not really they're basically humans, aren't they?
yeah,
But
but
with
they're refused service even in dead end bars, like in
sure,
dead end towns. Hives of scum and villainy. They still can't get served in a bar.
they
So
still can't get served in a bar
George is
until they in the Mandalorian, where it's quite nice. They've done a reversal where the droids now run the bars,
yep,
which is a nice
very nice.
shows some progress has happened.
That's right.
uh, After the Empire went down, they kind of upped the game and go,
Yeah,
well, let's actually
spoilers
give
for
them.
anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars. But,
Yeah, yeah.
it comes
Although
back,
mainly
goes
Star
away
Wars
again.
isn't about the plot of Star Wars isn't mainly about licensing laws though. So like if it was, that would be a bigger spoiler. But it's a tiny spoiler
Yeah,
for as Star Wars spoilers go. That's a teeny tiny one. But yeah, no, I find them all very satisfying. And I wanted to pick R2D2 certainly over C3PO, who, although like a very cool looking robot, is a very like no one likes
no,
C3PO.
no,
No one likes him.
no.
Um, I know people like him. I don't like those people. Um, but R2D2 is a very friendly. He's got his job. He's stubborn. It shows him in a good light that he's still mates with C3PO because it's like, well, that guy's like an idiot.
No, but
But like,
C3PO does imply that R2 swears at him quite a lot.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like we don't know what R2's saying, but C3PO does, and he's often quite offended. So
sure. But R2D2 is still mates with him
yeah,
in a way that we like him. And I mean, the only reason we kind of tolerate C3PO is via R2D2.
right. Yeah, but we all got
Um,
friends like that. Who've got friends that we have to
yeah,
tolerate.
yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, um, and I always like that thing where it sort of became a thing afterwards, didn't it? That initially George Lucas always said that they were about, the Star Wars saga is basically about Darth Vader, and the prequels are the story of Darth Vader turning to the dark side, and the chapters 4, 5, and 6 are the sort of redemption of the Darth Vader character. And then recently they've gone, well, it's basically the the main films are all about the Skywalkers. That's what they're about. It's the Skywalker saga. But in that in-betweeny prequel world, George Lucas just started saying, "Nah, it's about R2D2," and I quite like that, where it just sort of switched it to being the most sort of fun character. He's like, "No, no, he's the main guy." Because in the first one, and it go, "Sure, I guess he's like the main character," and it almost does make sense, especially in the original Star Wars. It's all you're kind of following him. All the events happen because you know they miss they don't get shot up when they jettison themselves at the beginning. It's all that, isn't it? And you are following them and their journey. And I quite like the idea that it's basically an R2D2 is the main character in all of Star Wars.
Love it.
What is your number 3?
My number 3 is Synthezoid. I'm not sure he counts, but I think he's a robot. His Vision from the Marvel comics.
Sure.
Uh,
I think for sure a robot.
yeah, but they call him a Synthezoid, and
Okay.
he possesses emotions, and he is able to achieve emotional growth. Right? I mean, so is Astro Boy. So I guess he's similar, but yeah, he's created by Ultron, who is himself a robot created by Hank Pym. And then Ultron creates Vision out of the Human Torch, the original Human Torch from the 40s, who was a robot made by Mr. Phineas T. Horton. But also, the Vision is really a reprising of the Vision, who was an alien character invented by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon for Timely Comics in 1940. That's what the look is, right? So that's really complicated way of coming about. And in the films, he's made by Tony Stark out of his butler. I mean, it's bonkers.
Yeah, there's some very satisfying way of doing it. I can understand why you do that in the film, the cinema world, because it just
totally.
it cuts things out, doesn't it?
I don't have a problem with that.
And also, I always thought it was a bit neat to do that, and it's they sort of struck lucky a bit with Paul Bettany, I think, and you go, oh yeah, I mean that's worked out well.
Yeah, like they cast him to just do a voiceover bit, like 5 minutes voice work, and then he's done like 5 films and a TV series. No, I was always a big fan of the Vision. I really like, although it's rubbish looking, I really like the kind of that Roy Thomas Avengers comics that they come after Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and they have Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye and Quicksilver, and along with Captain America, and then they introduced the Vision, and he's initially a bad guy, and then because Ultron creates him to be a bad guy, and then the Avengers kind of convince him like, look, that guy's a wrong un, because he's capable of emotional growth. He goes, oh yeah, you're right. Actually, the guy who creates me is a bad guy, just totally bad. So I'll join you guys. And then he gets married to the Scarlet Witch and really has a lot of emotional growth. I basically, I just like how he looks. That's the other thing. I think I like really colorful superheroes, and he's really colorful. He's he's more colorful in the comics than he is in the film. He's like yellow, green, and red, but bright.
Yeah, I think that's a real strength of it, that he is colorful in a way that robots aren't necessarily colorful. They're grays and silvers, but it is that kind of 4-color comic. And when they say it's in full color, they need to make sure these robots are in full color. So they really go to town on it. And I think it is. I think that color scheme really works and is a great look for it. I think it's an interesting conversation that you were saying that it has growth, but it's like all the robots we're talking about really do have, they've kind of got very humanoid or human-like lives. They're not just robots. And I guess a robot, except for Asimo and Atlas, are probably the 2 exceptions who don't really, we hope, have any kind of internal thought and logic. Well, I suppose they must have some sort of logic, but they don't have that sort of human emotions, I guess. And to have any connection to a robot, guys, you need to have some sort of human emotion or connection.
I don't know. I feel quite strongly about my number one, but yeah. The there's another complication
Yes.
with the Vision. Doesn't he die and then be brought back to life using some of the brain of former Avenger Wonder Man, who had
Yeah.
also been the boyfriend of the Scarlet Witch?
This is like the Tin Man all over again.
So that's what I mean. It's like the Tim Wan. She's like, when she's like, "You're great. You're the Vision, but you're partly Wonder Man, who's a
Yeah.
rubbish superhero. Definitely better off being part of Vision." And then,
Although
like
I
later
think we
on,
disagree that I think
Wonder Man gets brought back to life as well, and then they have a kind of awkward love triangle, much like what you were saying about the Wizard of Oz.
yeah, exactly. Maybe there's a weird maybe that's what would be the inspiration for it. Also, I guess Scarlet Witch is also a witch, so would have had the powers to. Oh, there's witches and tin men all over the place.
Yeah.
It could well have been for all we know. It's the kind of thing that someone like one of the creators has copied, thinking no one would ever make that connection.
No, I think it's like you said. I think it just goes into the kind of common
Culture of
perception, yeah, the culture of about robot people and android putting people together, bringing people back to life, all that kind of thing, and it goes way back to fairy tales and that kind of thing. But yeah, the Vision for me was always one of my favorite Avengers, but was never a big character. And to see like him be in all the films and be a really essential character, and have an Infinity Stone in his forehead and all this kind of thing, is just great to me. Like, just
yeah.
it's I love it that because there's characters that are huge that I don't much care about, like Iron Man. I don't really care.
No,
But
no one
but
cares.
they do. They love Iron Man. People love Iron Man.
Oh, they do now, but I
They
think
do
they love
now.
him most via the films, right?
Totally. But I don't even really like him in the films. But I mean, like, some people are like, that's great. I love Iron Man. I'm such a big Iron Man fan. I'm gonna 3D print myself a whole Iron Man suit and
Mm,
robotize it or whatever. I'm like, I can't believe the Vision gets his own TV show. I can't believe
it's true.
Captain Marvel gets to film. So I love that stuff. So yeah, Vision is a robot I'm very happy to see having his time in the sun.
Yeah. My number two is also a Marvel Comics character. It is Machine Man, for whom I've got a T-shirt on. Machine Man, the living robot. And the reason I was sort of going to mention it before was that Machine Man is essentially the same premise as Astro Boy. He is built by his father, Abel Stark. He is Aaron Stark, the Machine Man. He is trying to build sentient robots. And every time he does it, these sentient robots all end up going mad. And Aaron Stark, the Machine Man, the living robot, or Mr. Machine, as he was to begin with, um, is the original. No, he's the 51st robot to gain sentience, and he's able to gain sentience above all the previous 50 models because at that time, Mr. Machine made his first appearance in artist Jack Kirby's spin-off adaptation of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I think it's in issue 8 or 9 of 2001: A Space Odyssey where Jack Kirby attempts to sequelize the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey in a completely brilliantly bizarre way that really has very little to do with the movie,
It's
and
amazing.
instead is about having the black monoliths from 2001 arrive essentially in the Marvel universe and end up accelerating human thought and experience within the pages of the Marvel universe. So while Abel Stark, the scientist inventor of these robots, comes across one of the black monoliths from the 2001: A Space Odyssey movie and realizes that through it he has gained the knowledge to finally create a sentient robot, and creates Aaron Stark, who is essentially, again, he's Pinocchio, he's Astro Boy, he becomes Abel Stark's son essentially, and is a human person who has to try and understand the human world, even though he's essentially a robot. And his whole character, ever since, has been used as someone who struggles between the idea of whether it is better to be a human or a robot. And often, which doesn't say a lot of for us, often finds himself preferring to see himself as a robot than as a human, which is a critique on all of us. In that sort of way that Jack Kirby's very good at doing these kind of also big, weirdly moral ideas that no one really like. Almost like, is it more moral to be a robot and things? And it's like sort of quite mad, very Jack Kirby-ish, in the way that someone like that. Jack Kirby, I'm sure you mentioned before, basically virtually kind of created most of the Marvel universe, but was an artist that did a lot of the writing that Stan Lee gets a lot of the credit for. The other great thing is that it starts off as a Jack Kirby creation. It spins off from the Mr. Machine, becomes the main character in 2001, and eventually has his own series where it's renamed Machine Man for the first time. And Jack Kirby does the first few of them when he's replaced with Steve Ditko. So I've always liked that it goes from a Jack Kirby comic to a Steve Ditko comic. Steve Ditko's the artist of Spider-Man, who's the co-creator of Spider-Man. And then when that series wrapped up, it was written by a guy called Tom DeFalco, who resurrected the character a few years later. And that's where I first saw it. He resurrected the idea, and I first saw it when I was a kid, and it was in the back of the UK Transformers comics, where they would have the first 11 pages would be a reprint of American Transformers comics, and the backup strip would be Marvel UK trying to pass off some other robot character as a transformer so that kids wouldn't notice. And they started reprinting an 80s Machine Man series that was by Tom DeFalco. Bob Layton did the layouts, and it also had like great Barry Windsor Smith artwork. And it was this great, all set in the year 2020, that sort of followed on from the original
Last year,
series.
the COVID year.
Yes, the COVID year, all set in the futuristic 2020, when I was reading it in 1985 or whatever. And it was one of those comics that I really got me into comics. And I loved the artwork, and I love the sort of design of the future. And it was very much Barry Windsor Smith doing his kind of Mobius kind of French Metal Lurlon inspired sort of futuristic thing with this old kind of Jack Kirby creation. And so it's almost that he's sort of been lucky in that he's always seemed to have these quite visionary creators working on him that always makes his comics much more interesting because of it, and much more readable. And you could almost kind of amass a whole collection of Machine Man comics and pretty much always have good ones, because he's always, and I think that's it. I think he's an interesting enough character that he attracts very good creators to work on him.
Do they still put stuff out from him? Does he still?
You get stuff he still turns up, and he's often used by creators, because I think he's not like, he's a 70s Marvel character, but he's not even one that's especially popular, I think. But he's obviously a bit of I think he's still one of the few characters that feels like a cult character at Marvel. So there are always, people are always using him and pick him up and put him in other scenarios. And he's got quite a neat, that backstory is always kind of quite neat to do stuff with. There's sort of endless amount of stories you can do with a Pinocchio robot character, and especially one, like I say, who has that kind of moral ambiguity about whether he is a robot now, whether he's a human being, or whether he wants to be one or the other. And it's that kind of, in that way, it's a Jack Kirby thing, but it's quite philosophical, like I guess like Silver Surfer and things. Is kind of what it means to be human and all that. It's that kind of.
He's got, as a character, I haven't read the later ones, but I've got the Kirby ones. I don't know if I've got all of them, but I've got a lot, and I love that Kirby 2001 in a way. So although he's a Kirby creation, he takes some of the look for him, I think, from the Spacemen in 2001. Do you know what I mean?
He
definitely does. The look for that. So his real world parents are like Jack Kirby and Stanley Kubrick. It's like, that's an incredible team up. That's incredible. genealogy to have. I mean, the Jack Kirby 2001 comic book is a huge, huge
Treasury edition.
treasury
Yeah, yeah,
edition. So it's like, it's as big as books were when you were a kid, but for you now. And it's full of crazy space scenes and photo collage bits, and it's
yeah,
amazing
yeah.
looking, total crazy sci-fi.
It
And then,
starts off trying to be, yeah, an adaptation of the movie.
yeah, the comic
And if
book is,
anyone likes the movie, they should seek out the comic because
yeah,
it is like,
that treasury edition is basically the movie very
mm,
condensed, right? And then you get
yeah,
this ongoing series which just goes all over the place. It's literally like Jack Kirby going, what would I like to see after having seen that film? And his mind's going mad, and he's just like coming out with stuff. This is, oh yeah, that makes me think of this. And it goes all over the shop, a very long way from where it started. And yeah, it spawns this great character. But what an amazing, you can't imagine a movie tie-in comic book spawning a whole other direction of travel, of thought from some other great creator. It's just crazy.
yeah, it is. It generally is a crazy idea, but it really pays off. I think he's definitely one of my kind of favorite comic book characters.
My number two is Wally, the waste allocation load lifter Earth class, star of the Pixar movie, directed by Andrew Stanton. It's the 29th century, and Earth is a wasteland, completely abandoned by mankind and covered in rubbish. And the only waste allocation load lifter Earth class still operating on Earth, trying to clean up the mess, is Wally. And we meet him, and he's this fantastic robot character, incredibly lovable and a sad character, lonely on Earth with only a cockroach to keep him company. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, it's on a good day, it's the best Pixar film. Like it's well up there. And I think Andrew Stanton is. I think he's the best director at Pixar. I don't think that, not to say that, you know, Finding Nemo is the best film or whatever, but I don't think he's done any duds there. I think they're incredible, and he's written on all of the good Pixar films basically.
I don't think Wally is the best Pixar film, but I think it's when Pixar really felt like they were at the height of their powers and what they were doing. Like everything about Wally was like, we're going to get the best people in the world to realize this character.
Yeah.
And it's Ben Burt, isn't it, who did lots of the kind of droids from the Star Wars as
Ben Burt,
as the voice.
Ben Burt, the sound designer of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, E.T., all these classic films. The greatest sound designer in my book. I just think, how many other sound designers can you I could do a top 5. I could do a top 20 Ben Burt sounds. I couldn't do that for any other sound designer. I'd struggle. Like he's on another level, and they got him in to do the sounds for Wally after he said, I'm not doing any more robots, I'm done, I'll do something else. They got him in to do them, and then he did the voice for Wally himself, modulated his voice and all this kind of stuff.
But I think that's perfect, right? It has such a kind of sense of sort of film history to be like, well, the voice of our robot, the Pixar robot, will be the guy who's all of the robots.
Yeah.
So it's sort of perfect. It's perfect casting.
It's a lovely tribute as well. It's just, but the film in general has phenomenal sound. Like every time like a spaceship door opens or something, it's huge and loud and chunky, and it's beautiful stuff. He's a lovely little robot. He looks awkward and ugly and kind of industrial. Really, he's not like a sleek futuristic robot. He's a clunky. He could be made now. He's a clunky robot, but with so much personality, and they do all this personality with just two moving eyes, right? Like that's all he has, is his eyes kind of move, not the eyeball, but the eye thing, socket thing moves around, and his hands move, and that and he has two little tracks to propel him around. It's an incredible. It's just, I don't necessarily think it's the best Pixar film, but if you said it's the best Pixar film, I wouldn't be like, no way. I'd be like,
exactly,
that's cool.
Yeah. It's not my favorite, but it might be the best
The
as well. Like it
story is
might be.
incredibly neat as well. He accidentally finds an example of life on Earth, natural life returning to Earth after humans have wrecked it, and that kicks off this whole adventure. Yeah, I'm not going to say any spoilers because if anyone hasn't seen it, they should see it. It's like it's easily one of the best kids films made in the last 30 years or whatever. It's phenomenal.
And it takes its sort of inspiration as well from all those kind of 70s movies like Silent Running and the robots that are in that, I guess, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And it has this, and for something that has this amazing sound design, is that it also knows when to be silent and when to make lots of noise.
And the first 10 minutes of the film are almost silent, right? I mean, it's a very dynamic film, pacing wise and sonically, like you say. Like there's huge, noisy, crazy chase scene bits, and then there's bits of extreme peace and calm, and it's brilliant.
Cannot fault it. Cannot fault it. My number one is the Iron Man, and I guess by its association, the Iron Giant, because I like everything that has come from that book. And I read the book, I think, or the book was read to me, I think, in primary school for the first time. And I think I would have been 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And I found it mind-blowing, that book. And it's still one of those books I think back on incredibly fondly. And it was... I remember it being read to us by our primary school teacher, and everything about it, this idea that it's a story about this boy who finds this Iron Man, and he uses 2 nails to tap together to attract it. But the book, of course, has that thing where he ends up fighting the big space dragon thing at the end, which is a weird thing. And the book is really in 2 halves, which I find weird. It does have that. You've almost got that's almost like the second book, the second volume of it. It's quite odd. And so it's really interesting. That book has kind of been with me all through my life, really. Very soon afterwards, that book, I remember it being on Jackanory. And at the time, I was I remember having that weird association where there was a book I knew that was on Jackanory. So having something else like, it's that thing again. I remember having that weird nostalgia for something that was probably 6 months earlier, but in that way you don't really get it. Like, oh my God, they're doing that book that I love, but it's on telly.
I could totally remember that Jackanory as well.
It was in my memory when I was a kid, I thought I thought it's someone like John Pertwee, and when you look it up, it's Tom Baker. And I thought, what weird I don't even know that I would have known that association at the time. And you go, but also now it's like, God, is that on YouTube? Because I remember it. Like that's something I kind of again have this total really sort of strong memory of watching the Jackanory of it, and it being really kind of dramatic and really making an impression. And when I Googled it today, I've seen that, they are on YouTube, and it's like, oh, amazing. And also the idea that it is someone like Tom Baker with that voice, you think, well, no wonder, of course it's gonna be. Like, you can kind of just suddenly in your head play it back and go, oh, well, of course that's going to be something. And certainly everything, like the concept of who Ted Hughes is completely, Ted Hughes will always be, for me, it's the Iron Man guy. Is that the guy who did the Iron Man? Everything is filtered through the Iron Man.
Rather than being like poet laureate.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Everything is like, everything you find out Ted Hughes later, it's always filtered through this idea like, yeah, he did do the Iron Man though, didn't he? Like it's this sort of but also like years later again, like things like the Iron Giant comes along, and
which is a cartoon movie from 20 odd years ago.
1999 the movie came out, and it was probably like, I didn't know that in America the Iron Man is called the Iron Giant because of Marvel Comics. And I never knew that. And I think I was like probably halfway through watching the film before the penny dropped. And I went, wait, it's the Iron Man. And having this, but a completely sort of different version of it, like completely kind of free adaptation, which really adds something to it, which is also like, I really like they've taken this one thing and turned it into something else, and I love both versions of it.
Mm.
And again, that's Brad Bird, who went on to work at Pixar and did The Incredibles and
Yeah.
Ratatouille. And again, he's someone that's kind of introduced to me via the Iron Giant movie, and he's someone who has a real kind of aesthetic in Hollywood that I really totally buy into. And the Iron Giant is such a kind of sort of sweet, moving, funny movie, and it was made by Warner Brothers Animation. And even though they'd done stuff on TV like the kind of Batman animated series, it almost felt a bit like these guys are so far behind everyone else. And you sort of realize that, I think, through that, and I think they probably should have tried to cultivate someone like Brad Bird to just do work for them.
Yeah.
It was probably like this sort of moment where Warner Brothers suddenly had this thing come out, which was like, it could go to toe with anything that Disney are putting out and things. And it's such a great movie. And I think I don't think the movie was a big hit at all, and didn't really seem to make the impact that they thought it would. And if anything, but I think it seems to have. I mean, more recently, that character, I think, is showing up in the new Space Jam movie, and was in that Ready Player One awful movie.
So he's just been subsumed into the Warner Brothers canon.
Yeah, canon, I think. And I think now they're using, but now I think they understand there is a power to using that character, which they're currently kind of really doing quite poorly, I think. And and I think that part of the reason is, I think one thing what they're using it as is, wow, that's a cool looking robot, which is true. But they sort of forget that the reason people love the film is not because it has a cool looking robot in it, is because you totally invest in this robot, who is, again, he's in this, it's more like in the Iron Man book, the Iron Man doesn't really have a personality to speak of, other than he's a friend of the boy. Whereas in the Iron Giant, you really get a sense that he is a robot who is trying his best to be good, and is influenced by all the kind of Superman comics that the kid reads and things, and is very kind of it's a very Hollywood version of it, but in the best possible way that means it. And I think for that reason and that journey, that I've long followed those characters, that the Iron Man stroke Giant is my number one. What is your number one?
No, I just want to ask you a couple more things about the Iron Man.
Okay.
Have you ever read the sequel, Iron
Which
Woman?
One? No, I haven't.
So I have never read it. But
I've never even seen it.
I remember it coming out. I assume it's terrible because it came out like early 90s. When I was a kid, and I'd read or it had read to me the Iron Man, and I really liked it. And I can remember my mum reading it to me, and the pictures I made in my head when she was reading it to me, I still have there. Their memory locations and images that just there, and that's 36 years ago, 33 years ago, I don't know, something like that. But so I remember it coming out and it being like, yeah, Ted Hughes is doing a sequel to the Iron Man, but it's like about environmental themes, like acid rain or something, But then I've never heard anything about it since. So I guess it's not a classic, but maybe it just was missed out. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't know that's when it was from. It's something I'm aware of since, and but yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe it was that late, so it was sort of too late for me. But yeah, and I've never seen it in the flesh. I've never seen a copy floating around anywhere. I'd probably pick it up out of just vague interest.
No, I think that's a great one, and it's a great robot. And to me, like a really mechanical sort of robot. Like some robots are more electronic and some are more mechanical. Yeah. Even something older like the tripods, are kind of quite electronic, and stuff like the Iron Man, I guess just by saying it's iron and clunking and huge, but it really feels like a real mechanical monster. Nice monster.
Sure.
My number one has already been on your list. I'm sure you can guess who it is.
Is it R2D2?
Of course it is. It's R2D2. I love R2D2. So my favorite thing, I love Star Wars, right? But people go to me, they're not even that good movies, especially the other six or something. I'll go, yeah, sure, fine. Or people go like, oh, this has got bad acting in them. I'll be like, yeah, sure. Or the dialogue's rubbish. Yeah, fine, whatever. What I like best in Star Wars is the world building and the design, and that's the sound design and the character design, the technology design and stuff. And R2D2 is probably second only to a stormtrooper helmet in the things that I love most design wise in Star Wars. Like R2D2 just looks fantastic to me. There's loads of droids in the Star Wars world. There's some really good ones. I love a Gonk droid. I love a droidica in the prequels. I like that funny one in Rogue One. I like loads of great droids, tons of great droids. I love a pit droid, tons of great droids. R2D2 just stands apart. The white, blue, and silver color scheme, the way he can walk awkwardly or roll on three legs, three wheels. He can climb upstairs using his one front leg wheel. The noises he makes, the way his top half rotates like a bin lid. The light flashes and goes different colors, goes blue to red, right? It has like a gel on it. Um, he has all these little bits that can pop out of him, little screwdrivers, little things to interface with computers. He can throw a lightsaber out of his head. He can even do some little electric shocks. Just he's like a proper Swiss Army knife of a droid. He can do everything. C-3PO is a translator. R2D2 can do absolutely everything except translate. Like C-3PO can do the one thing that R2D2 can't. Everything else R2D2 can do. I love him so much. Like he's the absolute star of the film series. He was owned by Queen Amidala, right? Then Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And then ends up, through magical chance, aka the Force, being owned by Luke Skywalker, their son, spoilers. And he does that by scuppering another robot. He's absolutely the star of the films, and they hadn't worked out what to do with him in the 3 sequels, right? So instead of, they just had him switched off in mourning. And then he comes back, switches himself back on. It's genuinely my favorite moment in any of the sequels. I teared up in the cinema when that happened. I don't know if I saw it with you. I probably hit it if I did. But like him, like being reintroduced and waking up was like really emotional for me, because Kenny Baker, who sits inside him in the original films, and the way he kind of wiggles around and operates the lights and the spinning thing gives so much character. And then the sound design from the aforementioned Ben Burt, all these like wiggly noises. I'm not going to do an impression because it's beyond human ability, but he's got so much character, and it's that weird thing that you can do with things. The more humanity you take out of something and make it more alien and more robotic and more weird, the more we look for personality in them. So you're looking at this guy who we can't understand, and he just has so much personality. He's so lovable. He's the only robot that doesn't get his brain wiped. So he knows everything. Like all the way through the 9 films. He knows everything that's happened. He knows who everybody is. When everyone else is like, oh, I don't think I remember owning a droid. And, people have forgotten everything. He knows everything going all the way through. He's the beating heart of Star Wars. He's a beautiful droid. I love him.
It really is. I think you're right in pointing out that it is a real design classic, and there aren't really things before it, I think, that you can point at and say, oh, it looks a bit like that thing. It really does feel like it's kind of come out of nowhere, I think.
There's a lot of things afterwards.
Great. Lots of things, loads of things after it look like it. But it is one of those. I always loved that thing of like, it is funny that the way, like you're saying, it's almost like we were talking about in the puppet episode. Yeah, the almost the less you see, the more personality it has. Or it's almost like Sooty or something. Is that thing where like you kind of know what these things are doing? It's a glove puppet. It has that same thing like a good puppet does, that you do transfer a lot of, you know what he's thinking, or you know if he's angry or upset, but there's no language done. I guess it's that thing like, you know, like a silent movie star in a way.
Yeah, you have to
I
do
always
big movements and this kind of thing
Yeah.
to convey stuff.
My thing as a kid, I used to always like when I had the R2D2 toy, the thing I used to always make sure I did would be to that when I had it moving, I wouldn't just drag it along. I had to, of course, put him at that almost 30-degree angle he's at, because otherwise it's like,
Not
well, it
accurate.
doesn't go like that. He sort of does it. He sort of sticks his little belly out.
I've
To
got
go
a more
along.
recent toy here, which exactly is in that pose.
Oh, they do it in there.
The he's got,
There you go.
so he can't retract his middle leg there.
Okay.
Euphemism, but yeah, and he kind of makes the noise, this guy, but it's a bit faint because it's like, you know, 25 years old. So no, that really needs
Sort of.
a
It
new
picks up.
battery. Needs a new battery. It's probably an annoying watch battery that I won't be able to find, but he's fantastic. He's one of the most exciting things for me about when the prequel films came out in the late 90s, and you know, he was in them again. You're like, oh, we were all like, oh, is Han Solo going to be in it? Is Luke Skywalker going to be it? And is Chewbacca going to be it? And the answer was no. But you know, R2D2 and C3PO, but R2D2 was in it, and he was all shiny and clean and fresh out the box, looking like a clean pair of trainers.
I also
Phenomenal.
like that thing you said about C3PO, that C3PO's job is a translator, and he does the one thing that R2D2 can't do. But you go, oh yeah, that's almost that C3PO acts like he's the boss, and actually he only does this one thing. So it's almost, do you know what I mean? It's almost like he's quite protective of. He allows C3PO to be like the kind of, to act like he's the boss whilst actually being kind of the one who's in charge.
He's the brains, and he just does things, and C3PO has to sort of follow, complaining. But it's amazing if you watch Hidden Fortress, isn't it? The Kurosawa film, that the opening scene in Hidden Fortress is two kind of peasants picking over the dead bodies after a battle of all these samurais and bickering amongst themselves. And it's very much like, when you see that, you very much see the dynamic between C3PO and R2D2. And so that's part of that Kurosawa dynamic is, but to transpose that to two robots who, they don't really play the same role. I mean, they're not the narrators, really. They're not really, you know. And then, yeah, the design, you've got to give props to Ralph McQuarrie, who did so much of the original Star Wars designs, and R2D2 was built by Peterick Engineering, which sounds like a solidly old-fashioned company, but it's just, I don't know, like, it's one of my favorite things, like that R2 unit, this droid, this thing, this blue and white and silver thing, is like one of my favorite made up objects. You know, it's I love it. Couldn't be
Great
anything
answer.
but that for my top robot.
Good robots all around. Good choices.
Yeah, my 5 was pretty much my 5. The only thing that came close was like a HAL 9000. HAL 9000 from 2001.
Oh yeah.
That's a good sort of scary robot, you know, and a fantastic piece of design. Again, the red light eye communication thing. T-Bot from Mask, the Mobile Action Strike Command. T-Bot was very much an R2D2 knockoff and pretty rubbish, but he was cool because he was a robot that belonged to the little boy. Don't think I can remember the boy's name. Can you remember the boy's name?
No.
Something Tracker, because he was Matt Tracker's son.
Right, yeah.
Was he Scott Tracker? Let's say he was Scott Tracker. Anyway, if maximum points to me.
Was Matt Tracker the one with the moustache?
No, Matt Tracker was the like blonde, boring one who drove a red car. Anyway, T-Bot was like a round robot with bendy arms, like, and he doubled as a scooter, which was what was cool. So I was like, I've got my pet robot that's silly. It's
Yes.
like the comic relief in this kid's cartoon, but he can also be a scooter, and that was quite cool.
I had like a few that I thought were Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah.
That's quite a cool robot. Similarly, I guess Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet,
and I guess you
and the
could
Invisible
credit
Boy.
you could credit Robbie the robot as being a bit of a R2D2 influence visually. He's like
Yeah, I suppose
less
so.
humanoid, a bit more rounded and dustbin looking.
Yeah. What else do I have? Astro Boy. I almost would have liked to have put the Transformers because I loved those when I was a kid, but the movies have genuinely ruined that for me, I think.
If you had to pick one Transformer, which one would it be?
I think maybe like Bumblebee or something like that, but again, not the film, the little toy car.
Yeah, the toys are better than the film or the
Yeah.
or the cartoon.
That's what I mean, the little toys.
I think the one I like best was, I never had it, but is it Starscream, the one with the cassette in it?
Oh, Shockwave.
Shockwave. That's the one with the cassette. Well, that is the cassette.
Yeah. Oh no, there's like the little thingy. You mean the ones who are the cassette is what's he called? Ravage is he called?
Maybe
The one that becomes like a panther.
Yeah. Oh,
They're pretty cool.
They're cool robots.
What else do I have?
A good one which we haven't mentioned is Bender from Futurama. That's a really good robot with a lot of personality.
And I reckon would probably I think it'll be in a lot of people's top 5.
Yeah, I think if you got that in top 5, that's fine. That's a top robot. And I've been watching a bit of Futurama again because it's on Disney Plus, and I've got that, and it's great. Great stuff.
I like in Fantastic Four cartoon that they replace the Human Torch with Herbie. I think Herbie's a fun robot character.
I think if you no, Herbie's rubbish. Herbie, it's rubbish. Having to not have the Human Torch in your cartoon because kids might set themselves on fire is just rubbish. Don't make the cartoon. Just don't do it. Herbie's rubbish. I hate Herbie.
No from Ulysses 31.
God, that's a throwback. Yep.
There's things like there's lots of cool robots that like you just think they're cool, like, but I don't really have that association with them. Like I really like seeing those Voltron robots, but I don't have any association. But I kind of think, oh, that's all cool.
Yeah,
robots that all clip together.
Mazinger is cool robot. I don't really like the Matrix films, but I do like that anime prequel that they made.
Oh yeah.
Is that called Rise of the Robots or something like that? Maybe that's
I think it was
something. Like
yeah.
And it's like the story of how the robots who were oppressed and abused by humans took over, and that's a fantastic, riffing on a lot of already existing robot stories, but fantastic visual version of the robots taking over. Way better than the Matrix films themselves. And I love a bit of that.
I think the Daleks in Doctor Who are a proper good bit of 60s design that kind of goes above and beyond anything else that they were producing at that time.
Yeah.
And again, like those sort of 60s movies
are they
made.
robots, though? Don't they have a fleshy alien in the middle?
They got a fleshy alien in the middle, so I guess
they're more like vehicles, aren't they?
I guess they are more like vehicles in that regard.
They're like segways.
Well, then we could do now. I've just realised we could do top 5 cars and include things that have little alien drivers in. We could finally do our cars.
Cars, but it'll be like
things that have been driven by maybe we found a way around doing this.
Cars. We should do top 5 cars where it's just like
vehicles.
Number 5, blue cars. Number 4, green cars. Number 3, black cars. Number 2, silver cars. Number 1, red cars. Something like that. Batmobile. Do you think we'll have robots living in our house with us in our lifetime? I know some of you out there will have Roombas that already live with you. I've got a small toy robot that my kids play with. It's like they shout at and it comes towards them or something.
I don't think we will now because I think I think that's kind of been superseded by having like Alexas and things. I think people have realized they don't need a robot. They just need someone to talk to.
I don't know.
I think we've kind of already done it.
I could do a robot to like hang out the washing or something.
Yeah, but I also think robots now are like in the world where everyone lives in smaller and smaller places. I think the idea of having something which is the size of another one of you almost feels a bit like I think the world's shrinking living spaces rather than
Well, you just
people
buy,
living in
you
big
have to
houses.
design a robot that like folds itself away into its own cupboard. So you buy the cupboard, it's like a Jack in the Box, and it just once a day comes out, gets its toilet brush, cleans all your toilets, hangs out your washing after washing its hands, and then
And
folds
then turns
itself
into
back
a
up
tape.
into it turns into a tape that turns into a panther.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Get on that,
No, it turns
scientists.
into a scooter and takes your kids to school, like T-Bot. I think we will. I think we'll have crazy robots, but maybe they'll, instead of being like human-sized robots, they'll all be nanotechnology, and we'll have like a fleet of like
Oh yeah,
tiny,
sure.
tiny weeny robots that like go around and they clean the toilet out by like diving in, like and then scrubbing it all,
Yeah.
and then diving
Or
out.
like those little fishes that sometimes eat the skin off people's feet. You could somehow like bioengineer some robots that like eating shit or something. Little shit piranhas. Little robot shit piranhas.
That's what we're getting in our toilets. Be careful though, if you fell in. Do you know what I mean? If you sat too far down.
Yeah, if you had a blockage. And I suppose they'd eat the blockage. Otherwise, you've got to
Yeah.
try and
If you had a blockage that
sort that out.
malfunctioned, yeah, put your hand in there and get eaten by shit
Oh, man.
piranhas.
What a scary thing. But get on it, scientists. Pull your fingers out. Do your job. Get some little shit eating piranhas going.
That's the dream. It's the dream. I see at this very moment, Boston Dynamics are like
Yeah.
re-planning their next 10 years of developments. Don't think it would impress at the robot trade shows, where they turn up and demonstrate a new thing. What have you got? Well, we got some shitting piranhas for you.
That's the kind of thing I would turn up for one of those shows with. Go, who's this guy? But I'd have it like in one of those like
In a, in a, in a
bags you hold like a goldfish in. This guy, got one of these. Yeah, it's little fish robot. It eats shit.
Yeah, it's not cruel though because
Hey,
it's a robot. It's not a real fish where it's cruel to have it in a plastic bag. It's a robot.
you can't throw me out.
Yeah, because you'd make them gold, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
You'd
of
make
course.
them look a lot like goldfish, but really they're shit-eating piranhas. Robot piranhas.
Robot piranhas, of course.
Shit-eating robot piranhas is like, that sounds like like Snakes on a Plane level movie, right?
That's C and TM list off, guys.
Yeah.
So hands
Sharknado.
off.
Sharknado, eat your heart out. We got the next big stupid film.
Yeah, or the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Shit eating.
Shit eating robot piranhas.
Piranhas.
Tiny shit eating robot piranhas. I think that's the. It's not a very good acronym, so we'll have to work on that.
No. Oh, I've taken a turn for the worse. I've given it an E explicit content, I think now.
That's all right. If you want to hear more of Nathaniel swearing, you can listen to his regular weekly radio show with Nick Helm, Fan Club, on Fubar Radio.
If anything, I'm very much the junior when it comes to swears on that show.
No, there's definitely more sweary than we are on here. And they talk about films, but they pretend they talk about other stuff. But they talk about films and they interview people, and it's great. And you probably already know about it because it's much more famouser than we are. But if not, yeah, Fan Club. Is it just called Fan Club or Nick and Nat's Fan Club?
It's called Nick and Nat's Fan Club.
It's on all the podcast places, so it's dead popular than that. But everything on there is shit eating, not just the piranhas.
Thank you very much for listening. If you like this, please like it places or give us a review or join us on all social media at ListOffPod. And why don't you tell us your top 5 robots?
Yeah, to hit us with the ones we obviously missed out that we meant to have, or the ones that we didn't mean to have because we don't like them. We hate those robots, but you like them. And just give us more requests because it's like we've got a long list of ones to do, but they have to be like the right ones at the right moment where we basically go, should we do this? And then both of us have to go, yeah. That's the criteria, basically. And that if we don't do that, it doesn't mean we're never going to do that one. But it's got to be like, yeah, for right now. So give us more. There's some which like you think like we'll do that, but it's going to take us years to decide.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm still struggling with top 5 times of the day. That's a real mind bender. Coming back to that, Toby.
And it changes depending on when you think of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the trouble with it.
Live very much in the moment or in the future.
Yeah.
I think about an hour ago, but it's not relative, is it? Anyway. Yeah, so give us some more ideas for stuff, and please share any good robot videos with me. I like watching real robot videos. You know, is there someone better than Atlas? I like robots, so you know, send me some robot videos.
I think I almost prefer watching the ones that look like this shit themselves than I do. I like the look of that guy who walks around.
You know what he needs?
He needs some shit,
shitty
tiny
robot
piranhas. Yeah,
get on it. Asimo right out. Come on, Honda, get on it. That's the missing link. See you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.